Hello and welcome to the Paranormalist Podcast. I'm your co-host Stu, and I'm here with the paranormalist Patty Wilson. Patty, how are you this day?
I am doing okay. I'm not sure if he's going to make an appearance or not, but maybe here. Come here. Old Ponty's sitting here kind of overseeing things on my end.
Hey, old
He
man.
wants, yep, he's 24 for anybody who doesn't know. He's 24 years old. Yes. All right. Let's see if he'll stay down there on the couch with me, but sometimes he decides he has to steal the show.
Well, you and I are both cat people, so we know. We'd
Yeah.
like to thank everyone for tuning in again. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. Click the like. Everything else, description-wise, is in the description. That's why we call it the description. And with that, I'm done talking. How about that? There's the short version. So,
It
what's our
is.
topic for today?
Well, we're going to visit Halloween again. And by that, I mean, I got to thinking, the Halloween's just over, and I wondered how many weird things happen on Halloween. So I took a little jaunt through some stuff and I found some very bizarre stories. So I thought I'd share a few of them tonight.
Fair enough.
So, so we're going to start with the ones that aren't necessary. I don't know if they're paranormal or not. I should say that this way, because there's just something so unnerving about some of these. And then we're going to move into some definitely paranormal territory. So I came across a list of odd events on October 31st. So in Long Island, New York, in 2014, on October 29th, was right before Halloween, of course. Um, People in this area and this little street noticed that a man came out of his house and he was carrying what they took to be a mannequin. And he threw it onto the edge of the highway, almost, into the middle of the road. And then the head of the mannequin popped off and he kicked it off to the side of the road and went back in the house. Well, it was, as I said, along the edge of the road, but almost into the middle of it. So people, after a little while, people swerving around it and what have you, somebody went out and thought we should probably drag this off before it causes an accident. And much to their horror, it was a real person. It was
Oh,
actually a professor who was
hmm.
66 years old. Her name was Patricia Ward. And her son had murdered her. And then he just took her outside and literally threw her in the street. Well, by the time the police are called and everything, they go after her son, and he's missing. Eventually, they would find that he actually went out and committed suicide by stepping in front of a train. To this day, nobody knows why.
Well, especially
There's
if the head was not connected. Oh
exactly, the
my.
head was
Yeah.
obviously not connected. Yes.
Ah.
And then there's these bizarre stories. So in Delaware, a few years back in 2012, there was a woman who had a really lifelike um, display in her yard. She had what looks like a hanging corpse in her yard on a tree. She had a bunch of other Halloween decorations. It definitely fit the motif. And for several days before and after Halloween, nothing got moved. So eventually, a neighbor decided to go over and knock on the door and see if this woman needed any help. And, hauling everything down because she hadn't made any move to move stuff, and it had been well over a week since Halloween. So he knocks on the door and nobody answers. And as he's going back, he thinks, how odd, she's dressed it in some of her clothes. It turns out she committed suicide. And because it was Halloween,
Oh.
everybody just assumed it was a mannequin and never checked. And there are literally, honestly, I found dozens and dozens and dozens of these crazy stories from
And if it,
all over the world.
yeah, and after Halloween, the weather is typically not hot, so you wouldn't have the quick decomposition. Oh boy.
Yeah. And literally tons of them in Los Angeles. There was a
Hmm.
similar story where somebody got somebody was got shot, and they were leaning against the house where they lived, that kind of slid down the side of the house and were leaning against it. The house was really, really decorated for Halloween. Same story. People saw it sitting there, head down. Nobody looked. And then days and days go by. And after Halloween is over, somebody decides to go over, and because they're surprised the decorations are still up. And when they get close, then they do smell it and realize something's amiss. But the person lay there dead for almost 2 weeks.
Right.
And it's just crazy. But undoubtedly, one of the stories that I found most intriguing took place in 1939. Now, in 1939, in Provincetown, Massachusetts, it was just about Halloween, and it was, that couple days before Halloween when you're in school back in the 30s, they would have a Halloween party at the grade school, and the kids would often parade through the school in their costumes. It was a lot of fun. And in the last couple days before Halloween, the kids began coming home in the late afternoon talking crazy, talking about this black shadow that jumped out of nowhere and scared them. Well, the parents all kind of thought it was sort of maybe a prank, or the kids were just, caught up in the theme of the moment. So they didn't think anything about it. But that's going to all change. So one night, there's a woman by the name of Mary Acosta, and one evening, she's right before Halloween, is walking down past the town hall, headed home after work. It's dark out by now, and everybody in town had heard the crazy stories from the kids, and everybody had decided it was a prank by some of the high school kids, if there was any truth to it at all. So Mary's not thinking anything about it. And Provincetown, Massachusetts has a large summer population, but they're pretty much all gone now. So it's just a local, about 4 or 5 thousand people in the community. And she's walking home. And that's when everything changes. As she would later state, she was walking past the town hall and down the street. Everything was pretty much closed. It's like 7 o'clock at night. And out of nowhere, this is how she put it, out of nowhere, an 8 foot tall figure with pointed silver ears and glowing blue eyes fell down in front of her. Like, I mean, literally just dropped down in front of her. And he had on a long cape, and he had a silver glowing face. She's absolutely petrified by this thing, and it it stands there looking at her, and then all of a sudden, without any effort at all, it jumps almost directly straight up and disappeared and never landed. She's horrified. She can't make her head out of what it is. In the distance, she sees the lights of the little local diner. So she runs for the diner. She's shaking. She breaks into the diner and starts to bawl. And people, of course, can see she's agitated. So they start asking her questions. And they want to know, what's going on. She tells them this crazy story. Now, the very first adult has seen whatever this thing is. And over the next few nights, it appears again and again and again and again, whatever it is. So each report was almost like the other. It's dressed in black from head to toe. It has some sort of a cape. It's got its face and head and back covered. It has glowing eyes. Now, some of them say they're red rather than that silver blue. She said they were blue eyes. Others will describe them as silver blue, and some people say they're red eyes. And it has pointed silver ears, and some of them describe it as a mask, silver mask over its features. And they almost all talk about a weird buzzing sound that accompanies this figure. And they describe it as like a loud sound of a fly or a bee. And this thing can jump 8, 10, 12 feet. And there is some evidence that they could actually gauge it. It wasn't just guesswork, because long after this whole thing starts. Of course, the cops are getting calls. The police chief kind of goes out and tells the newspaper, hey, tell everybody these are just pranks, I'm sure, by some teenagers. They need to calm down. And then one night, one of the neighbors near the local grade school calls the cops and says, that monster, that thing, it's out there. It's in the playground. Now, the playground has a 6 foot high chain link fence around it. So there's 4 officers who are called, and they think we will get it now because it's inside that 6 foot high fence. So they all show up, and they have their guns in one hand and their flashlight in the other, and sure enough, there it stands right inside the fence, and it sees them, and they describe it um as this face. Instead of they say that it had a silver painted mask, and they say that it's got red eyes, and as they yell for the figure to freeze or they'll shoot, it kind of just shoots. It doesn't, like, how you bend your knees and jump. It doesn't do that. It just shoots straight up in the air, cleared the 6 foot high fence by a couple feet, and then disappeared to where they have no clue. So over the course of the next couple weeks, more and more people are seeing this thing. And some people called it the Providencetown Phantom. Others called it the Devil of the Dunes. Still others called it the Phantom Fiend and the Black Phantom. However, the name that the newspapers picked, and the one that would stick with it forever, is the Black Flash. And it is just an infamous thing. Now, it picks up steam instead of kind of calming down. And it seems to be being seen in 2 places at once. So the police are getting phone calls, and they're like, it's down at the school. I just saw it. It's down at the school. And the next call coming in 20 seconds later is, no, there's one over by the post office. It's over by the post office. And now it adds a new trick to its bag of tricks. At the same time, people in 2 different areas of the town are seeing these things. And now, instead of it just jumping, now it spits blue flames out of its mouth when it's approached, and then it jumps and disappears, and it disappears up into the air. They don't have the faintest clue what's going on. It is just, really crazy. So then there's this one guy, local fella, his name is Charles Farley. And Charles one night sees it, and now everybody's kind of keyed up over this, and he has a gun. So Charlie pulls the gun out and shoots it. And instead of it dropping to the ground, it starts to laugh. Then it leaps over a fence, a large high fence, and disappears into the night. Now people are saying, is it bulletproof? Is it not even human in any way? Meanwhile, the police chief is really struggling because he doesn't know what to do about this. So he gets on the local TV station, and he's like, look, it's 4 teenage kids. We know who they are. They're getting on top of each other's shoulders and pulling this large cape and coat over this so you can't see them. And the rest of it's just a prank. But people don't buy it because, like, how did the kids jump into the air and not come down? And what about the blue flames shooting out of its mouth, or the fact that its eyes changed from silver blue to red? So it's just not working. Now, interestingly enough, somebody brings up the fact that in the late 1880s in England, there was this figure, and maybe some of you recognize the story, of a guy named Spring-Heeled Jack from
Oh
Victorian
yeah.
England. And remember him?
Yep.
And he had a lot of the same attributes. They used to say he looks like he had springs on his heels, and he would be able to jump great distances upward, but he would land on the other, like he would come back down and kind of pogo away from them with these great big leaps. But he also had glowing eyes. He also spit out fire and things like that. So this old story from England begins to pick up steam because they're like, is it the same being? Is it another being? Now, there are tentative sightings of this thing that continue for a little bit, for several weeks, and then it just drops off. But in the 1940s, there are going to be some rumors of sightings, and as recently as the 1970s, it's just a fascinating story. There are actually people to this day that go there and try to look for it. There's a gentleman who was a researcher on the paranormal, and he ended up going there and trying to find all the newspaper accounts and what have you. And he actually talked to people who recounted their family having had experiences with it and read the old newspaper accounts and what have you. It was really interesting. And then they talked about how this thing would also leap out of the fog. Like you would be there and all of a sudden, it would just suddenly get really super foggy, like, within seconds. And then this thing would just suddenly drop down in front of you. And then as it disappears back up into the air, the fog just dissipates, which adds another layer of complexity if these is teenage kids. I mean, they had sound effects and special effects that could have been used in Hollywood at that time. It's just a fascinating story. The last really serious sighting of it, it actually takes a little bit of a different tinge. So the black flash had been seen, as I said, for several weeks. It was now mid-November of the 1938 sighting. And late one afternoon, there were three kids playing outside in their front yard. Their parents weren't home yet, so it was like early evening, late afternoon, still daylight, and the kids are outside playing when all of a sudden these kids, four of them in total, um, they're called the Gennard kids. They're from the family by the name of Gennard, and they're out in their own yard. They're playing when they notice a strange figure heading in their direction, and he's coming out of a weird misty fog that just sort of materialized out of nowhere. And so the oldest of the kids, he gets kind of spooked, and of course the stories are floating around. So he yells for his siblings to go in the house, and they lock the door as this thing gets close. And he thinks, okay, that's the end of it until this thing begins to try the door handles. And then it starts pounding on the windows, and it goes to every possible place it could enter the house. Every window on the first floor, the doors, tries the doors, jiggles the doors. And the other three kids are so terrified, the younger ones, that they climb behind the furniture and hide. But the oldest one, whose name was Alan, he thinks he's got to do something to make this thing go away. So he goes upstairs and he grabs the scrub bucket and he fills the bucket with really hot water from the tap. And he can hear this thing pounding on the front door again, trying to get into the house. Well, he knows that the one bedroom window is directly above the front door. So he opens the window and he throws this bucket of water down on it. He can still see it. And it looks up as the water's coming down, and then it yelps and screams, and then it runs off into the fog. Nobody has the faintest idea what this is. And then there is one last encounter before this ends. So there was a young guy by the name of Eight Ball Eddie. He was a pool hustler in the town. And
Okay.
according to his story, which ends up in the newspaper, Eddie had thought the sightings were pretty much what the police said. It was a bunch of kids screwing around, and he laughed at people for being afraid of it until he had his own encounter with the black flash. So he said that he saw this guy coming toward him up the street one evening, and he was really tall, super tall. And he said, I thought, this has got to be the dude the kids are seeing. He's just a really tall guy. He's kind of thin. And he said, but I noticed as he got closer that he had a hood over his head and this cape. And he's like, his eyes were glowing silver. He said he came directly at him. And Eddie said, I ordered this figure to get out of my way. And the figure then lunged at Eddie, struck him across the face so hard, he not only hit the ground, but he kind of flew backwards. I mean, there was a lot of velocity in this strike. At this point, he's almost dazed. He manages to get back up and drag himself backward. And the next morning, he's got a red handprint bruised across his face. And everybody laughed and said, this is ridiculous. But he said, after that, he was done. And so we don't know to this day who or what it was. It made its stand. And I have to tell you, 1938 in Providencetown, it was just a weird year. There were so many other bizarre events before this, and this was the last one for the year. So, in January, there was a sea monster, quote unquote, sea monster that was brought up out of the ocean. And anybody who's ever seen, there's an old photograph of what looks like the Loch Ness monster. It's got like this long head and what have you, and it's hanging off of a hook on a boat. And everybody today they tell you it's a basking whale. It's a rotting corpse of a basking whale. That's the sea monster they're referring here. And then there were other monsters that were supposedly seen in the water. Um, and then beyond that, there was a dog. There was a case of dogs suddenly going crazy and stray cats attacking people. There's no idea why that all happened. And there were just all kinds of craziness. And by the way, this is pushing into the Second World War. The British were also causing a little bit of a scare because they were taking their submarines up across the coast here near Providencetown, right under the water, because they could avoid the German U-boats that way. So there was all kinds of craziness going on. But in the midst of this, well, I don't know what it was. Some sort of creature that they called the Black Flash. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. It's not the only Halloween when crazy stuff happened. In 1963, in a small town in Argentina, there were three sisters who witnessed a bizarre series of events. So on the night in question, this would have been Halloween night. The sisters are settled down at their family home, the Moreno home. They're adult women, and they'd all kind of come home to visit. Some family friends were coming in and what have you, and everybody was there for a gathering. And um, Rosario, one of the sisters, and Yolanda was another one of the sisters, and Jolie was the third sister. And they were all visiting with their parents. The friends were coming in, and all of this was a great, evening. And all of the women had young children with them. And their husbands were away in the military. So this was, like I said, a big family gathering. So on this evening, the the electric generators for the little community suddenly quit for no apparent reason. So they quickly have their dinner before it gets too dark. And then as they're waiting for the electricity to come back on, everybody sort of settles into the living room for a while. They talk. It gets really dark. There's a few candles lit. They decide to blow the candles out, and everybody's going to go to bed. Now, about nine, this is about 8 o'clock in the evening. About 9 o'clock, one of the girls gets up because Jolie, she wants to feed her baby's crying, so she figures she's going to have to give her something more. So she goes downstairs and stumbles around a little bit, and gets stuff out of the fridge to feed the baby. And they have a domestic housekeeper working there, young girl. Her name's Dora Guzman. And Dora comes running into the kitchen. She's really scared, and she says, "There's lights on the railroad track." The house is not far from the railroad, very, very close. And she says, "There's crazy lights out there, strange lights, not like the railroad lights should be. And they're moving around in these crazy patterns." So Julia goes and looks out the window, and sure enough, their crazy lights are out there. Now, the other two girls are roused because of the noise of the maid and Julia talking. So they come and look out the window, and they can see it too. And it's just these very weird lights. They're nothing that they'd ever seen. It's like a strange beam of light would shoot upward into the sky. And was almost like a solid light, golden light, and it would move and then it would flip colors to green and then it would stop shooting into the sky and then it would flip to a different color and then back to green and shoot back up in the air again. The girls began to think it's one of two things. There were gorillas, uh, bad guys, a group of bad guys in the area, and they're wondering if they had targeted the train and that the train had been derailed. So, and they start, as they're watching, they see what look like human silhouettes moving amongst these lights on the ground. So they decide that the three sisters decide to give the baby to the 15-year-old girl to hold on to. They grab flashlights and they're like, we need to go out. If that's what's going on, we need to help these people. So they go down with the lights off and they can still see because there's so much light coming from the railroad area right there. And they are going through a field to kind of come in from the side so that they won't be seen as easily. But they got the flashlights in their hands in case they need them. And they begin to um, work their way down towards these lights through a field so that nobody will see them. And it says the article that I read said that they kept watching the human silhouettes moving close to the lights, and then they sort of paused as they got closer and were trying to figure out what was going on. And they were very close to the tracks. And at that point, a solid object that was disc shaped shot straight up into the air, and it looked like one disc on top of another with a green beam of light running between the two of them, creating a tunnel effect of light. And after several moments, the thing moved toward them, this massive light craft of some sort moved toward them. And it had little gold lights that suddenly came out of it and were shooting around it. And the girls are kind of petrified just watching it. And finally, it's literally right in front of them. And the one sister sticks her hand out and like almost to touch it is like she's just trying to make sure it's real. And all of a sudden, a green beam of light shoots out of the craft and down through her hand, not into her hand, not onto her hand, but literally like her hand wasn't there, went through the hand and continued all the way to the ground. She would later say that it scared her, but it didn't hurt. She said it didn't hurt, but it was hot. I could feel it was hot. Now the three girls are watching this whole craziness. The maid is watching from the house with the baby, and they don't know what to do. So the two sisters recognize that the other one, the one that had held her hand out, that she's kind of not moving anymore. She's just staring, almost like she's petrified. So the two girls begin to grab her and they're trying to pull her backward, like, come on, we got to get out of here. And they're just literally dragging her along. She's not making a sound. She's not moving of her own volition at all. And she's just frozen, staring at this thing. So they grab her by her arms and they start pulling her back to the house. And this green glow starts spinning, and then all of a sudden it flips to an orange, bright orange, and then it's above them, and they see these gold lights again, and it's chasing them as they're trying to drag their sister back to the house. And all of a sudden, the gold lights burst into flames, like they caught fire. And this heavy force, like a bomb going off, it hits the girls and the girls fall to the ground like they were blown off their feet. And now they're really under attack. They're really afraid. So they get to their feet as fast as they can and they keep dragging their sister and they get her into the house. And the maid is like standing there holding the door open for them, and they get her into the house and she's still not made a sound. So they get her to to sit down, and then they wake up their parents and the whole house is awake, and they're looking at this massive whatever it was, and it's now hovering around the house, going around the house like it's seeking entrance. And they they don't have anybody they can call. The electricity's off. The phones aren't working. They just sit there and they wait. They can see all the craziness going on at the railroad tracks. And as soon as they're able to get the phone to work, they do call for assistance. And nobody else saw anything. Nobody working at the railroad. Nobody from the farm whose field they went through. Nobody in any of the other houses along the road by the railroad. Nobody. But in Transcus is the name of the town, in Transcus in Argentina in 1963. This event has never been explained. The girls were interviewed immediately after by the police. They were interviewed by psychiatrists. They were interviewed by reporters throughout the years. They never changed their story. I don't know what it was to this day, but they're not the only strange things that happen. There are a lot of really eerie stories about black-eyed kids seen on Halloween. And, you know, people of obviously at the beginning of this see stories, they thought they were just kids in costume and stuff like this. But check out a couple of these tales. So there were no black-eyed children stories that were known as such until the 1990s. And then all of a sudden in the 1990s, the idea of the stories of the black-eyed children just kind of flow into the public, and they come from many different people. We're going to talk about one in Portland, Oregon. In Portland, Oregon, there was a gentleman who claimed that he had noticed that his neighbor hadn't put out any Halloween decorations. And the year before and every year prior, this guy had really decorated for Halloween. So it was a couple days before Halloween. He saw the neighbor coming up the sidewalk to his house, and he yelled, "Hey, do you need some help to decorate for Halloween? We missed all your stuff." And the guy's like, "No, no, I'm not doing that crap anymore." And came over and he's like, "Why not?" And he's like, "I don't want to talk about it, just not." And he said, "No, seriously, because like everybody on the street loves your decorations." And he's like, "Look, I had something happen last year and I just don't want to talk about it." Well, over the next few days, the guy goes over a couple times and he finally wheedles out this story. And this is the story he claimed that he got from his neighbor. So the neighbor said that the previous Halloween he had been standing outside handing out candy, was getting late. He had decided to turn his porch light out and was just getting ready to like pull everything inside and lock up for the evening when these two kids suddenly were just on the porch. He didn't remember seeing them come up the walk. He didn't remember seeing them get up the stairs. They were just standing on the side of the porch. One looked to be about 13 or 14, the other about 15 or 16, and they were boys. And they weren't dressed up, like they didn't have costumes on, their faces weren't painted. But in the shadow, it was hard to see them, but they looked like they were well dressed with sweaters on, and they had blonde hair, very pale blonde hair. And he said, I remember the one had like a flannel checkered jacket over his shirt. And he said, oh, suddenly, as soon as I saw them, I was uneasy. I felt like I needed to get away from them. So I kind of stepped into the door, opened the door a crack, and said, "Hey, sorry guys, here's the last of the candy." He sat the bowl down like he was going to leave it and go into the house, and that's when they stepped into the light where the door being open allowed some light out, and he caught their eyes for the first time, and were pitch black, large. He thought at first maybe they were like contact lenses or something like that. But the more he looked at them, the more he was pretty sure it wasn't a contact lens at all. And he said he got really nervous and he tried to smile and he's like, "Hey, you guys can have the candy. I got to go in." And at that moment, one of the boys, the older one, said, "Can we just wait in your house for our parents to come and get us?" And he said, all of a sudden, I just felt like my entire life was in danger. And I said, "No, no, guys, no, not tonight. Sorry, it's getting late." And he kind of stepped into the door further and then stepped back really quickly and slammed it and locked it in front of the kids. And he said, I could hear them outside and they were at my windows. They were um, looking at the door. They pounded on the door. They asked me to let them in. And I yelled, no, I'm done. You need to leave. And he's like, I felt like I was going to die. My heart was just trip hammering. So after a little while, it got very quiet. He's looking out the peephole trying to see what's going on. And he decided to, just stay up. So he's sitting there with the TV on really super low. Um, and he's kind of watching around. He's really not looking at it at all. And he said, I could hear them. And every time I'd get up, they'd be standing on the porch, just staring at the door. And he said it was like 5 a.m. until I finally got up and looked again, and they were gone. And he said, so I just decided from, you know, like that, I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't know. Maybe it's the Halloween that brings them out. Maybe they feel like they can blend in better. I don't know what it is, but I'm not I'm not putting up Halloween decorations. I'm not celebrating. I'm not opening my door. I want nothing to do with this ever again. It's an interesting story and not the only one.
Yeah, some of
This
the other
was,
bl- the other
go ahead.
black-eyed children stories you told, they gave up after a little bit. This one
Yeah,
sounds like they were
these,
really persistent. Yeah.
and it's not the only one that's like that way. So there's another one that I have here, about a woman who she's, basically the same thing. She is, she's out there for trick or treat. Her name is Sarah, and she's, hanging around, sitting out there on the porch with a big bowl of candy, like a lot of people used to do. She's got two or three little dogs in the house. Her husband's upstairs sleeping for work, and she's giving the candy out. And about 10 o'clock, she decides, well, it's been a kind of a slow night anyway, so she's going to start packing it in, take the dogs out for the last time for the night, and then go in the house. And she could hear her one little dog in there kind of going, whimpering because, it's past her bedtime. She wants to go pee. She hears the shower kick on upstairs. She knows her husband's up. He's moving around, getting ready for work. And she steps inside the doorway there, and she's pulling the little stand into the house when and she's got everything right inside the door. She shuts the door, and in just that second, the doorbell rings. Like they were literally on the porch waiting for her to shut the door, and she didn't see anybody. So she looks out through the door doorbell thing, and she's like watching them, and there's these two kids standing there. She's like, I don't, they would look like late night trick-or-treaters at first. She said, but I noticed that my dogs, which had come running when she came to the door to start dragging the stuff in, were like in a corner, cowering. And all of a sudden, she just felt like she was terrified. And she describes the children as a little girl about 11 years old and a little boy about 8 or 9. And the girl said very politely, ma'am, can we come inside and use your phone to call our mom? She said there was something in the pit of her stomach when this girl said that. Pardon me. And she said, I yelled, no, no, you can't. And then she said, I felt bad because I'm a mom myself. I wanted to help them. And I said, why don't you give me the phone number? I'll call her. And the girl said, no, I really need to call her. And then she said, it's 2000, so people have cell phones. She goes, don't you have a cell phone? And the little girl goes, no, you need to let me in. I need to call her. And then she says, my battery is dead. And she said, for what? And she says, I don't know. That's the answer. My battery is dead. Can we come inside and call our mom? We're alone out here. My brother's scared. She said the more this child talked, the more terrified she was. But the mom in her's kicking in, and she's like, you got to be calm. They're obviously children. And so she turns on the porch light and gets a good look at him. And that's when she realizes the eyes are so creepy. They're large, black eyes, no white, just completely black. She flips the lights on or off and she says, no, I'm telling you right now, just go away or give me your mom's phone number. I'll call, but you're not coming in here tonight. She said, I thought about going upstairs and getting my husband, but I didn't want to leave the door. It wasn't that I was afraid he wouldn't believe me. It said I was afraid if I left the door, they could come through. Meanwhile, the dogs are whimpering, and all of a sudden the kids outside just together begin to bawl and cry and scream, "We need help, we need help, we need help. You need to let us in." And she said, I remember the fear that overtook me. I shut my eyes for a second. I locked every lock on my door, and I yelled one last time, "I'll call your mother if you give me the number, but I won't let you in my house. No." And then after that, they completely got calm. And for the longest time, she said she could see them through the beveled glass, just standing there staring at the door. She backed away and kind of stood there watching, but every time she got close, she knew that they would like tense up. She could see the shadows like getting a little stiffer, and she's like, I knew they were watching me. So finally, she decided to call a neighbor across the street. And she said, as I did that, I looked out one more time and I could see them now standing on the under the street light at the end of my porch. And they're still there. And it's been 20, 25 minutes. The dogs have disappeared, and she doesn't know what happened to them. She would find them upstairs in a closet area. They had kind of scratched the door open and had gotten into the closet as if to hide. So she calls her neighbor, and she says, "Hey, are there kids out on the street? Do you see kids out under my street light?" And he says, "Yeah. Isn't it kind of late? It's almost like 11 o'clock. They look like they're kind of small kids." She's like, "Yeah, they're kids." And he goes, "I'm going out to check on them." And she's like, I don't think you should do that." But he opens the door. She can see him coming out. And all of a sudden, the two kids are gone. So she opens her door and she goes out. And he's like, "Where did they go to?" And she's like, "I don't know." But she said, "I remember I ran back to the house and I went in the house and I locked the door and I got my flashlight and I'm looking all around. My husband's upstairs getting ready for work, and I go up and I'm like, 'Did you see anybody?' And he's like, 'What is wrong with you?' And she says, 'I don't know where they were. I don't know what happened. I I just don't know.' But there they were. And then they were gone. But they stood out there for a good half hour waiting for her to let them in. And I literally found probably 2 dozen accounts very similar to this. And I just was completely fascinated with these stories. And I wanted to share one more story. One of the things I love living in the woods and living out in the country are, I've always enjoyed them, are cornfields. I know they're mysterious. I know they have like their own energy around them. Like in the summer, if you live near a cornfield, you can hear the wind sighing through the corn, and it makes the husks or the leaves rustle, and they almost sound like they're whispering. And in the fall, when they are all dried and golden, there's this crackling sound, and you feel like there's something in the cornfields. And then I came across this story. This story took place on US Route 30, 25 miles west of Indianapolis, near midnight on Halloween. That might just simply be a coincidence, but we're going to go ahead and share this story. According to the person who shared the story, the road they were on is just miles and miles and miles of cornfields. It's late fall. The fields are, you know, the dried husks and the cornfield. And as they're driving along, she says she's watching for deer because it's late at night and deer come flying out of cornfields, you know, indiscriminately and run into the traffic and you hit them. So she's kind of keeping a weather eye in those cornfields looking for deer, slowed down a little bit to about 35 miles an hour, and she just keeps driving. And all of a sudden she sees something in the distance, and it looks like an orange reddish tone. Not quite like deer eyes. Deer eyes are kind of a white gold, they kind of glow at you. This is different, but it's still there, and she's trying to make it out. It's a gray mass sitting at the edge of the cornfield, up by the tree line at the end of that large cornfield she's driving past. She slows down even further, and she's about 20 yards away, and all of a sudden it stands up. and her headlights hit it. She said it was about 8 feet outside my passenger's window when I caught exactly what it was. It was a gray man, emaciated, dressed in what looked like clothing from the Great Depression. It was a suit with a brown fedora, with flames instead of eyes and nothing for a face. He was almost 8 feet tall. And just as I thought, he's looking into my skull, I passed him and I watched him as he walked casually back into the cornfield after I passed. And I could see him vanish into the field. Dude, if that isn't a creepy thing, I don't know what
Hmm.
is. With that, I'm going to wish everybody good night.